Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Hack Week. How are you all doing this weekend? I hope you are enjoying all these sessions and super excited for the session today. We are going to learn different ways how we can deploy our apps in cloud, and I'm pretty excited for this one. We'll explore all different ways that we can deploy web applications to the cloud. So, yeah, pretty excited. Let me know in the comments where you all are joining from, and then we can get started in a few minutes. I'm just waiting for the folks to join in, and then we can get started in no time. hmm Let me check the stream if everything is all right. If someone could give me a confirmation of how the mic and screen is showing up, that would be great. Yeah. hmm Yeah, looks like everything is fine from my end. Yep. Thanks for the confirmation, Rockpose. Glad to have you here. Yeah, welcome to the stream. Everyone, welcome again. All right, then. Let's get started with today's session. So let me pull up my screen. Mhm. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. I'm Sagar. I'm a coach here at Major League Hacking, and professionally, I am into cloud native and DevOps space for over 2 years now. I'm also doing my master's at TU Munich in Germany, and last week I had a super fun weekend in Porto in Portugal. So that was really much needed break for me after my semester. So enjoying my weekend in Portugal. If you want to ever connect with me, then here are my socials. I'm mostly active on Twitter and Instagram, and I would be more than happy to connect with you all. And once again, I would like to welcome you all to Global Hack Week, Cloud Week. One important notice that I want to give you all is I have collected all the resources that we will be using for all the three part of this stream. So the stream is a technical stream, and we will have a series of this. So this one is the first part. So it's a three-part series. So all of the resources that you need for all of my technical stream, you will find it in this link, mls.link/deploy with Sagar. And this will also help you to follow along with the tutorials, some of the important commands and some code snippets. You can get it here. So make sure you bookmark or just have this in your side so that you can follow along. So just to give you a quick breakdown of all the sessions that we have on plate. So the first part that is happening right now, we're going to learn how to deploy applications on virtual machines. We call it as VMs. And we also explore the different cloud service models. I am pretty sure all of you, or most of you, already have some kind of information of all of these topics, but we are going to explore it from a different perspective and hopefully give you some more insight on these things. Then we'll also briefly talk about what VMs are and just why we need that, and also the use case for the VMs. And then I'm also going to talk you about the Azure for Students account, which we are going to use today. We get like free $100 credit that we can use for our projects and prototypes. So that's great. We don't have to pay anything. Neither do we need to provide any credit confirmation. So that's also great. So we'll be using that. And on top of that, we are going to do demos of how we are going to create the virtual machine in Azure. So it's going to be on Microsoft Azure, and we are going to deploy a MERN Stack application within that VM. And we will also make the application accessible on the internet so that everyone can use that. So it's going to be like an end-to-end thing, and it will give you insight on how it looks from a production point of view, or how it looks from a DevOps point of view, how you can take your applications that you have developed to a live server. So that's what we are going to look at this, and we'll also talk something about the security configuration that you need to take care when you are deploying the VM, and also some of the network configuration that you need to be aware of, such as firewalls and setting the port access. All right, and these are the follow-up parts of the technical stream. So that's going to be tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow is going to be the part 3. So tomorrow we'll learn about how we can use managed services. So today we'll talk about the VMs approach, which gives you more customization options, but it's also a lot of configuration that you need to do yourself. So tomorrow we'll learn how we can use the managed services such as the Azure Web Apps and Azure Static web app to deploy our applications. And we'll also talk about how we can use GitHub Actions for automating our CI/CD process. So instead of doing a lot of things manually that you will see today, we are going to automate that tomorrow. And we'll on the way we'll also talk about how you can create your database on MongoDB at last, and we'll talk about all the things that we need to deploy our Mon app. Yeah. And the final part of the series, so that's going to be a bit different approach. So we are going to take the serverless approach, which I'll describe in the third part of what that means and why or when it can be useful. And there we will also explore the Azure Function app, the Azure Cosmos DB. All of these are the serverless offerings of the Microsoft Azure Cloud. And we will take a more real world or more practical oriented approach of using Azure Key Vault to secure our secrets and credentials that our applications might need. And we're also going to be use the infrastructure as code tools, in this case, Bicep, and the developer CLI to deploy our application. So you'll get more insights into how this looks real in real world or more like in a production scenario. So that's going to be for the serverless approach. So I hope you all are excited. Let me know in the comments if you are also excited for this stream and for the series. So without any let's get started. Yeah, I'm also checking all the comments while I'm doing this live. So you can always ask me any questions or leave your comments wherever you're watching from, Twitch or YouTube, and I will be able to pick it up from here. So first, let us talk about the different cloud service models. So mainly we have three models that we talk about. We have others as well, but in broad category, we have three. So let's talk about the software as a service first. So that's where we get things like Gmail, Dropbox, or all the most of the web applications that you use today, right? So Netflix and all those things where you are just accessing a piece of software through a web interface or from internet from your mobile device or from your PCs or wherever you are using it from. So you don't understand or you cannot do anything much about how the software is deployed on what type of server it is reading. These are taken care by the service providers. So for example, we use Gmail, but we don't get to control how the Gmail server is set up, and that's decided by Google for us. So that's software as a server service, and we get the least amount of control in this offering. The next one is the platform as a service, and that's where the developers come into play. So let's think of this as a developer scenario. For example, you developed an application and now you want to serve it or to host it, right? And then you look into the platform as a service option. So for example, you have your code on GitHub for your MERN application or any other application that you have. So you can choose different service providers such as Azure, AWS, Google, or you can also go for DigitalOcean and other service provider and just connect your GitHub repo with your managed service offering, and then they will do all the things of spinning the server which is going to run your application, also set up the storage services, also do a lot of network configurations and logging and monitoring. So all of those are managed by the service provider. You are still in charge of if you want, let's say, some additional storage that your application need, or if you need some more logging and monitoring option, or if you need more network bandwidth and those things. So you're still in control of that, but you don't have to spin up a server yourself. You don't have to decide which network bandwidth you want or what type of storage account you want. So it's going to be pre-configured for you. You still get some customization options, but yeah, it's going to take a lot of headache away from you if you are just a developer and you don't want to get into the hassle of configuring the server yourself and just want to deploy an app. So that's where the platform as a service come into play. You might have already used Heroku or Digital Ocean services or use Azure Web App. So, and also, for example, the AWS App Sync. So all of those are the platform as a service options. Then comes the infrastructure as a service. So yeah, let me quickly move on to the next slide. So that's going to give you more information. So I mentioned about the software as a service. So this everything is managed by the service provider, the application, the data, the operating system, servers, everything. In platform, most of the things are still managed by the service provider, for example, Google and AWS, but you are in control of your application and the data that your application needs, right? Think of Heroku or DigitalOcean connecting to your GitHub repo to deploy your applications, and the also the and spin up the database service for you. So that's the platform as a service. But with infrastructure as a service, you are in control of the operating system. You are also in control of the different middlewares that your application might need, and also of the runtime. So that's going to be taken care by you, but the virtualization and the servers and storage and network, that's still a part of the service provider. So the one that we're going to use today is under the infrastructure as a service. So virtual machines, we get control about what OS do we want, we get control about what runtime we want, the different architectures such as the x64, or if you want an ARM-based processor. So all of that is still in your control, but you don't have to do the hassles of building your own storage drivers or building the virtualization layer and all those things. So that's going to be taken care by the service provider. All right, so now that's done. So let's get more into the virtual machines. So for just a beginner point of view, for virtual machines is an abstract layer on top of your actual um, operating system or your actual physical device. For example, let's take a server which might be consisting of different storage. Sorry for that, which might be consisting of different storage. Um, devices or different network devices, and also you get some CPU, some RAM. So that's your server. And normally, if we talk about personal computers, we just have one operating system. So that's going to be the host OS. This might be Linux, this might be Windows, and those kind of thing, right? But and normally without virtual machines, your applications run on top of the host operating system. But when we want to deploy virtual machine, the hypervisor layer comes into play. So this is what enables the virtualization, and it's going to separate our physical storage or physical server specs into different isolated units. For example, we are going to have our own operating system. So in this case, in this example, we have divided the server capacity into 3 different OS, right? And each OS has its own binary files and libraries, and that's going to be have their own application, right? So that we have divided a single physical server, and then we have installed 3 different operating system on top of a host operating system. So your host operating system might be Windows, and then you can install Linux and different flavors of Linux, such as Ubuntu in one, Red Hat in another one, and then you can also install another Windows. So you can have one physical server and different uh, guest operating system. So that's the concept of virtual machines. So here you have a shared storage. This is the case of Azure. And then you have like 3 different physical servers, and the virtualization layer comes in between. And then you have the 3 different virtual machines. But remember, all of this, you can have different virtual machines within the same physical server. So in this case, physical server 1 has 3 different OS. Physical server 2 has another 3. So these are all the individual virtual machines, and they all can share the same shared storage as well. So that's done. And also briefly talking about the MERN application architecture that we are going to use today. So MERN, if you don't know already, then it stands for the MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js stack. So MongoDB is used as the database. It's a NoSQL database that we are going to use today for our demo application. So that's the MongoDB layer. And for front end, we are going to use React, which is a very popular React front end library. And then we are going to use Node.js for our backend stuff, and Express.js as the backend framework. So Node.js is going to be our JavaScript runtime, which is going to take care of all our server requests. So that's on the server side, and this is the front end, and we have the database. All right, so now let's go towards the demo time. All right, let me quickly pull up my screen. Mhm. I have some questions here. Yep, can you share that link? I can definitely do it. Give me a moment. Deploy with Sagar. Yep, this is the link. Let me see if we have other questions. Yes, So Kozu has asked if we are using Azure, and yep, that's correct. We are going to use Azure. Um, the other question, should we be using both Node.js and Express? That's a great question if you are not already familiar with the JavaScript stack. So someone else has already also hinted that, but they go hand in hand with each other. Node.js is just a runtime that enables you to run JavaScript on the server side. And Express is actually the web framework that you use to build your application and to define your API routes and everything. So Node.js is for us to run the JavaScript code on the backend, and Express is going to be the web framework for our case. So it's Express is similar to uh, a fast API if you are coming from a Python background, or Spring Boot if you're coming from a Java. So it's a framework, but Node.js is a JavaScript runtime. All right, let's go with the, I pinned the resources link. So if you want that, then you can always uh, get that. All right, feel free to ask me any questions in the meantime. Let me share my screen, present, and then I'm going to share my entire screen. Mhm. All right, I hope you can see this. Oh, and one more thing before I get started with the demo, give me a moment. Uh, Everyone, I request you to, this is the Notion page that you will see when you click on the link that I have provided, mls.link/deploy with Sagar. And here you can see all the prerequisites that we need. So we're going to need a Microsoft Azure account. So you can get the sign up link from here, and then you can get $100 free credits if you sign up with your student account. We're going to use the MongoDB in our second part, not this one. So stay tuned for that as well. We're going to touch that tomorrow. And you can also have Node.js installed on your machine, though I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that in the demo as well. And these are the two repos that we will use. So first one for part 1 and 2, we are going to use the specific repo. And then for the final part, we're going to use the second one. So you have the repo already up here, so you can get the installation guide also in the README, and I'm going to talk everything about that in the demo. And here you can get the follow along guide, and I have mentioned all the commands and the scripts that we are going to use today. So you can get the instructions from here as well. This is just for you to make sure or help you follow along. So yeah, I'm gonna put it here for my reference as well. And then one really important thing that I want to remind you all is to check into the event if you already have not done that. So go to the events page, events.mls.io/events 12373. Let me also quickly add that to the chat. Oh, sorry. Give me a moment. I think I have not added that to the stream. All right. So now I guess you can see the stream. So I was just talking about, hopefully, I was just talking about the Notion page. So the link points you to this specific Notion page, and I mentioned that we have all the prerequisites over here. So mostly we are going to need the Microsoft Azure account for today, and also the Node.js. For the rest, we are going to do it tomorrow in the second part. The repositories as well as the follow along guide with all the commands and all the instructions are also listed here. So this is just for you to follow along and make sure you can do it at your own pace as well. So all the guides is over here. I hope you can see this now. Yeah. And then, uh, yep, let I also wanted to remind you to check into the event if you already have not done that, and that will help you on some points for the Global Hack Week and get you some swags at the end of the Global Hack Week. So you can go here and just click on logging and register. If you have already logged in, then you should be able to see a check-in button, and then your check-in is done. All right, just a reminder for that one. Yeah, let me come back to the stream. Give me a second. Yep, and then, yep, this is the stream link. All right, now let us go back to Azure, and let's get started with the demo. All right, so once you are in your Microsoft Azure portal, so just make sure to sign up for the Azure for Students, and then you can go ahead and just claim your $100 credit. You don't need a credit card for this. So assuming, or you can do it on your own pace if you can't follow along at this pace. But yeah, you can sign up for Azure. It's a pretty straightforward process. And once you sign up for Microsoft Azure, you can go to portal.azure.com, portal.azure.com, and that should take you to this specific page. Um, all right, so the portal has loaded, and the first thing that we are going to do is to create a virtual machine. So let's go ahead and click on virtual machines that you should be able to see on top, or you can also click on create a resource and then search for virtual machines from here. Yep, you can search for virtual machine, and then you should be able to see the virtual machine on the results here as well. All right, so I'm going to click on create, right? And then here you should be able to see a subscription, which should also be the Azure for Students. And then we need to create a resource group. And in Azure resource group is nothing but a collection of all the Azure services that we are going to use. So mostly we put the services that we are going to use for one project under one resource group. There are different pros of grouping resources, but normally for this case, we are going to put all the resources or services that we use under one resource group. So right now we don't have a resource group. I mean, there are default one, but we are going to create a new one. So let's click name it as create new and GSW Cloud MERN app. All right, let's name it this way. And then the resources will be created and you should be able to see it here. Let me know if the font and everything is clear or not in the chat, and I should be able to help you out with that. All right, then we are going to name our virtual machine. So that's going to be GSW Cloud MERN VM, right? So that's going to be the virtual machine name. And the other important thing is going to be the region. So this is the location or the data center which actually runs your virtual machine, where your machine is running. So always try to, one recommendation is that try to choose it in a location that is near to your end users. This will help to reduce your latency, because when a user requests something to your machine, then the response will be faster if the location is nearer to the end user. So in this case, since I am from Europe, so I'm going to choose West Europe in this case. And if you are from, let's say, US, then there are other options. And also, if you are from the APAC region, then you can go with the Asia Pacific, such as Japan, or from even from there are data centers in India that you can choose, Central India. So yeah, just select one that you have. And for availability options, we have different options. For example, within the data center, there are different separated zones, and that is called as availability zone. For example, let's take an example of Frankfurt. So it might have a huge data center, and that can be divided into three different zone with their own power supply and own capacity and infrastructure redundancy, so that even if one part of the data center is down, the other two will still be running. So that's the concept of availability zone. And but we, in this case, for our application, since it's just a demo application, we are going to click on no infrastructure redundancy required. But for production, normally we deploy it in several availability zones so that our application is highly available and also fault tolerant. There are other options such as virtual machine scale sets, which distributes your application in random servers within a data center. But yeah, those are not needed in our case. So we are going to just click on no infrastructure redundancy required. But yeah, you should remember that there are concept of availability zone in production case. We are going to keep the security type as the default one, which is going to be the trusted virtual machines by Azure. And here we are going to choose our operating system image. So you can choose different ones. We have Windows, we have Debian, Oracle, Ubuntu, and a lot of other ones. But in this case, we are going to just go with the Ubuntu server, right? So that's what we are going to do, not Ubuntu Pro. Let's go with Ubuntu server. And then for the architecture, we are going to use the x64, but you can also go for the ARM-based architecture if you want that. And for the size, so that's going to be the combination of your CPU and the memory that you will need for your virtual machines. So in this case, the default that selected me is, no, I don't need the Azure Spot discount. That was by mistake. In default, it has selected the standard D2S V3. So it comes with two virtual CPU and then 8 gigabits of memory, right? So that's going to cost out 87.6. So it is still in the Azure free student credits, like it's one less than $100. So we should be good to go with that. But you can click on see all size and you can go and select the one which is cheaper if you want to run the VM for a long time. So you can select one of the other series. So for example, D series is for the general purpose, but let's say if you want to run some application that has high memory needs, then you can go with the E series, that's for database or some caching applications like Redis. If you need something more powerful for the other needs, then you can go with, let's say, for high CPU needs, then you can go with F series. So there are different options. So you can go and select the one that suits you. But I'm going to leave the default one for me because I'm within the credit limit, and also I'm just going to shut down the VM after a while. So I'm not going to use the full credits. This is cost is for a month, just for your note. All right, so that is enabled. And then for the authentication, we are going to choose the SSS public key. The password authentication is a legacy one and it's not recommended by Azure. So always choose the SSS authentication. So we need some way to connect with this virtual machine from our own network, right? So we might be using our own devices in our own location from home or from college or from anywhere, but the server is actually going to be resided in some data center in the West Europe region. So we need to authenticate to allow access for us to enter the virtual machine. So we are going to use SSS for that. The username is going to be Azure user. I'm going to leave it default. You can also change if you want. And then for the key pair, so we can ask Azure to create a new one. That's what I'm going to do today, and just download the private part of the SSS key. If you already have created the SSS key pair by yourself, then you can also upload or use your existing key. And I'm going to leave the default RSA format for the key, and the name of key is going to be this one. Um, MERN VM key, that's fine for me. And right now, we have only allowed, so this is the network configuration that we need to set up. So for inbound access, so right now, only SSS port, which runs on port 22, is enabled. So that means that even if we deploy our application later on, that we will do in the demo, if we deploy our MERN application to the cloud, the MERN application is going to be running on some port, right? For example, the front end might be running on one specific port, or the backend might be serving on another port, then those requests are going to be blocked by default. So we'll turn that rules, enable that port later on, but right now we're going to keep it as it is. So just I want the SSS access for now. So let's go ahead and click on, there are other options like setting up decks, networking and monitoring and all those things, but I'm going to leave this default for now and just click on review and create, right? All right, so this is going to take some time, and it's just validating our request. And you can see that all the details of the VMs that you have uh, selected, and I'm going to click on create. So you can see that it gives us the option to download the key, and you should always download the key because Azure created it for you, and Azure does not store this key. So you need to download it and store it in a secure path within your PC. So for example, I will copy it from my downloads, and under GSW, I'm going to paste it in new folder as a such. I'm going to create a folder, and here I'm going to paste the key, right? So right, let's go back. And now the VM deployment has started. Deployment is in progress. Uh, right, so let's wait for this time. And in the meantime, I'm gonna see if we have any comments or any questions. All right, let me stop the screen sharing until it's deployed. Yeah, I don't see any new questions, so I hope everyone is getting what I'm explaining. So hope you all are following along, or at least getting the concepts. Let me know if you are confused at any point, and I can explain those specific parts for you. All right, let me go back with this screen and then select the entire screen. All right, I am back now, and the VM is in the deployment. I can see that, and you can see the deployment has succeeded. And if I go to resource, you can see that the virtual machine is up and running. In the overview, I see the resource group. So it's under the resource group that we created. Status is running. Operating system is Linux as we intended. And here we have a public IP address. And this IP we can use to access our application. But right now, if you just copy and paste it on browser, nothing happens, right? Uh, can you guess why nothing happens when we uh, go to this IP? For two reasons. One, we don't have anything in the VM. We don't have our application within the VM. Second, the inbound port, which is default, for example, for HTTPS is 443. And if it was HTTP, it would have been 80. These are blocked because we have only enabled port 22 for SSS by default. So if I go to networking and network settings, you can see that only the SSS port on 22 is enabled, right? So that's why we, even if we had application, we could not have been able to access the site on port 80 or port 443. So we will do that at a later point of time. And you can see everything here, the text, the which text OS text it's using, if the auto sort down is not enabled, or if you want it to be enabled, you can see the vCPU and the RAM that is selected. So everything is here. Now, let us actually go ahead and try to connect to this VM. So I will go ahead and click on connect. And here I have the IP address, but remember we only selected the SSS options to connect. So I'm going to click on the native SSS and not the SSS using Azure CLI. We're not going to use Azure CLI to connect to our VM in this case. So I'm going to click on native SSS. And here you can see the different commands that you can use. It gives you some information. But yeah, this is the most important thing that you need. So for example, the specific command. So I'm just going to copy this one, right? And let me open up my terminal in this case. Yeah, and let me click on. So I need to go to the folder where my key is located. So in this case, it was GSW. And then let me, yeah, it was the SSS folder. So here I have my key. Let me zoom this a bit so that you can see this clearly. All right, so this is the key that I have downloaded from Azure, right? So let me copy the command, and you can see that I need to change the path of my key because my key is not in the .sss inside my home directory, but it's rather just here. So I'm just going to copy the name of the key. And since I'm already within the SSS folder that I created, so you need to run this command uh, and either ensure that you're already inside the path where the key is located, or if you are not in the path, then you need to provide the full path within this specific flag. So SSS-I, the path for your key. And this is going to be the user that we created at the server IP, and this is the public IP. So let me click on enter, and yep, for the first time, it's going to ask you to authenticate and validate. And here you can see that the permission is denied, right? And the warning says this is an unprotected private key file, and that's just give me a moment. I think my screen sharing is off. All right, sorry. Huh. Sorry for that, folks. Yep. All right. And now I'm going to, sorry for the glitch. I am having trouble setting up my monitor today. My secondary monitor broke down. So yeah, sorry for the disturbance. But yeah, I'll fix that tomorrow and should be fine. So I hope you can see my screen now. All right. So am within the virtual machine that is now deployed. And now you can see the network settings, right? So by default, we only had the port 22 enabled. That's only for the SSH. But now we want to access and deploy our application. So we need to connect to this VM. Later on, at the later point of the stream, we will also enable the additional ports such as port 80 and 443. But right now, we just need SSS port 22, so which is already enabled. So we should be able to connect. And if I click on connect here, then we have the public IP here, and I'm going to click the SSS native options. We're not going to use the Azure CLI for this one. All right, so I'm just copying the command that we have, the third one, right, this one, and we need to run this command from the key pair that we downloaded. So for example, all right, so let me show you the full context. So previously I downloaded the SSH key and put it in the SSH folder, right? So let me go into that folder, and here you can see that I have the key here. So if I copy and paste the command that I got from Azure, then this needs to be the path of your key. So if you're running this command from anywhere else outside of the folder, which actually has your key, then you need to provide your path to the key. So you can put it in the .ssh hidden folder from your home directory or anywhere you like, but you need to provide the right path here. So in this case, since I'm already in the folder that has the key, I'm just going to provide it with the key name, and it should be able to find the key. And this is going to be the user of the VM, and that's going to be the IP, right? So let me click on enter. And here you can see that we get some error of permission denied. And it says unprotected private key file. That's because that's the security feature from Azure. It needs, or it wants you to use a key which only has read access, because private, if someone get access to your private key, then they can SSH into your VMs and can do anything that they want. So in order to protect this, in order for us to, and not for hackers or some external threats to modify this key file, we have to make sure that it only has read access to the user who created the file. So I'm going to use chmod and give only read permission to this specific key. So I'm just going to copy this one. Yeah. So now what this does is it only provides the read access. So CSMOD 400 provides read only access to the owner of this file. So in that case, I was the one who just created the file. So only I will have the read access and not the write and the execute access. So now if I try to connect to the VM again, I should be able to access the VM. Yeah, now you can see that I'm inside the virtual machine, right? So let me clear this for you. I'm already inside the virtual machine. You can get that from the name of the user, and this is the name of the VM that we created. All right, so now this is a fresh VM. We don't have anything over here. So now this is the terminal of the VM. So now let us actually go ahead and try to deploy our application. So before that, I quickly want to show you how our application looks like. I hope you can see my VS Code Studio screen. And here you can see that this is the structure of the demo app that we have. And again, you will find the uh, resources link and the link for the GitHub repo in the uh, resources guide that I have. So if you go to the Notion page and if you come here, then you'll get the link to this repo right over here. All right. And that should point you to this one. So you can simply clone and follow along. If you want to modify certain things with the app, please feel free to do that as well. So we have the application within the app folder, and we have two sides of it, the client as well as the server. So client is basically the React applications, and it's using Vite as the development environment. And to build the application, we're just going to use Vite. And for the backend, it's a simple Node.js and Express application with MongoDB as the database, right? And if you go ahead and click on README, I can show it to you from here. If you click on the README, we just need to set up two different things for this app to run. So first, I mean, we definitely need to install the NPM packages for our server as well as client. But for our server, we need to provide the Atlas URI as well as the port as the environment variable. And if you want to run this locally, you can create a config.env file, and then here you can provide it the MongoDB Atlas URI. Or if you are using a local MongoDB, then just your local MongoDB URI. That should be more than enough. But um, if you're using it for the client, then if you want to run the client, and we are going to need another environment variable. So let me go to the README again. And here for the client, we are going to provide another environment variable, which is going to point to our backend API path. So since our backend by default runs on port 5050, so if you want to run this locally, then just provide environment variable .env file in the app/client directory and set it to your API endpoint. If you configured another port, for example, in the backend and config.env, if you set this to a different port, then you also have to change the same port here so that the front end can detect the backend in the right port. So that's for the front end and back end, but we are going to build the application and not use Vite to serve our client in the VM. So that's for the front end in production, and that's how our application looks like. And if you go to server, we have different routes. For example, server.js, this is going to be the entry point for our application. And if you just go to the main route, it's just going to log you a message with say server is running. But if you go to the record routes, it's a to-do application. So you have different records. You can get specific information about a specific employee, and then you can create a new record. You can add a new record. You can also get all the information. So this is a simple um, employee record application. Sorry, I mentioned it as a to-do application, but it's not. It's an employee record application, a simple one though. It's very similar to to-do application where you do very basic CRUD application, but we are doing it to get a list of employees or manage their records. And the client, so that's the React application. And if you see, these are the entry point for your applications, and it just displays different records of your application. So I'm not going to much into detail with the application code because that's not the focus of today's demo. The focus is on deploying this application. So let's uh, try to understand the architecture first, which I have demonstrated. So just remember, this is a server which is running Node.js, right? And if you see the package.js JSON, and in demo, it uses the node 1 to serve the application with the env file that we have configured to set up the Atlas URI and the port, and then it starts the server. And that's all that we need to know from here for the server. And for the client, we need to set up the API URL. And then after that, we can use Vite to build our application. And in demo, we can also serve using Vite as well. All right, let's go ahead and try to now deploy the application. So the first thing, if you go ahead and also see, for example, the guide that I have linked, for example, I'll bring it here. And then if you go to the follow along guide, the first thing that we have already completed the part where we connect to the VM, right? And now we need to install the Node.js. So I'm just going to copy all the instructions from here. These are from the official Node.js repo. So I'm just going to do the same thing. So getting the Node.js installation file, and then it's using NVM to install it, um, setting up the correct path and everything. And then let's use NVM to install the Node 22. So we are going to use the Node version 22 for this demo, right? So that's going to be downloaded. And also then we are going to verify if Node is running. So I'm going to do node-v. So yeah, you can see that the node is installed and it's using the current version. And yeah, that should be fine. The node is now installed. And also let us also quickly confirm if npm is running fine or not, npm-v. And yeah, the npm version that we're using is 10.9.2. So that's also running fine. The next step would be to install the MongoDB, because we are going to use the local MongoDB and not a MongoDB Atlas for this one. We are going to do that when we do the part 2 of this stream, where we are going to use everything as a managed service. So we have the node installed in our machine like we normally do for our own PC as well, right? So next step would be to install the MongoDB. So let me go and open the MongoDB uh, documentation page. And now you can go ahead and see the install MongoDB community edition. And here you get the important commands. So I'm just going to copy and paste this instructions. So it's going to install the required dependencies first, and then it's going to download the public ZPZ keys, and then we are going to do all the command for, we are using the Ubuntu 24.04. So I'm just going to copy that one. If you're using a different version, that please select a different one. That is done. And now it's also going to update our packages repository. Let us wait for a moment. In the meantime, if you have any questions, then please let me know in the chat. Let me quickly check the chat. All right. Thanks for reminding me about the screen though earlier. I hope now you are able to catch along. I think the server is now up. Yep, the packages is now installed. And now I'm going to install the server. So finally, we are going to be able to install the server. All right, this might take a few moments. And now we should have the server installed in no time. Mhm. Yep, it's taking a while. In the meantime, once the server is installed, we need to start the MongoDB process, right? And for that, it depends on what type of process manager we are using. So, for example, we can use this command to check if it's using the systemd or the init process manager in our Linux virtual machine. And in my case, I already know that for Azure Ubuntu, it's going to use the systemd, but if you are using init, then you can follow the instruction for the init. So I'll just copy the command here just to show you all how you can check that as well. Yeah, so now that is installed, I can check here and you can see that it's using the systemd process manager, right? Or then we are going to follow the instruction for the systemd. So this command should start our MongoDB sudo systemctl start MongoDB. Sudo will provide it the admin privilege so that we can start our MongoDB as a background process. So now the process has already started and we can um, see and confirm that by using the systemctl status command. So you can see that if I do status, the status is active and running and our MongoDB is already running, right? So that's for the MongoDB. And also I can check that by using uh, the process here. You can see that the process ID is uh, 4999. So that is also a confirmation that it's occupying a process in our PC and it's running over there. And then if you ever want to stop the MongoDB background process, then you can use the systemctl stop MongoDB. And to restart, you can use the restart command. So that's MongoDB for us. So MongoDB is now installed and we also already have the node installed. But the main application is still missing. So we are going to use the GitHub link to get the code to our VM. And normally, if you are using a private repo, then you need to zip. The easiest way to get it to the VM is to zip the entire repo and then use the scp command to copy the entire zip file from your local PC to the VM. So that's one way. But in production, we normally use a CD tool like GitHub Actions or Argo CD to do that for us instead. So we don't have to get the code to our VM manually. And that is what I wanted to show you as well, because we are exploring the first way of deploying our application, which is more additional steps and also a bit complex sometimes, but you get all the flexibility. Like we are setting up everything from scratch here. We are setting up MongoDB, we are setting up Node.js, we are installing and configuring permissions and network settings and everything. So that gives you all the customization if you ever need that. But it also comes with the complexity that I'm showcasing you. And tomorrow we will focus on the managed service where all of this is taken care of automatically. So we have MongoDB, but I'm going to use git clone and the repo URL. And now we should have the application code here in the VM. I'm going to go inside the application code path. And here you can see that we have the app folder. And let us first try to run the server components. So let's go inside the server. And here you can see that we have all the files. And let us install the npm packages first. And for that, we are going to use the npm install command. And this will install all the dependencies for our backend server. Yep, that is now installed. So the next thing that I need to do to run our backend, which we need first, is to set up the environment variable, right? So I already um, told you how you can do that locally. So we set up in the server, we set up config.env, and we provided two things like the port and the Atlas URI, right? So let us go ahead and try to copy both the port and the Atlas URI. So first, give me a moment. I will export the port in our server. So I'll clear this. And I will not create the config.env file because I'm already in the VM and I can just export it as the variable. But if you want, then you can also use Vim or Nano to create the config.env and set it that way. But I'm just going to use the plain CLI to do that. So port is going to be 5050. That's going to be the port for our backend. And I can check that using echo and $sign port. And you can see that the environment variable is now set. And similarly, the MongoDB, we are going to need to set up the MongoDB URI. And since, for example, let me do the systemctl command again. Systemctl. Yep, this one. You can see that it's already active and running, right? And the MongoDB runs on port 27. Let's check the port where the MongoDB runs, and then we need to enable, put that in the URI, right? So give me a moment. Yep. And before that, I just also want to enable that in the network settings so that our application server is enabled. So we are going to create an inbound rule. This is just for checking. I'm going to disable the backend port later on once I have the front end configured, but for now, just for us to check, then I'm going to set the destination port ranges as 5050. We need to enable inbound on port 5050. We will disable this later on, but for now, for us to check, we are going to enable this one. All right. While this has been created, give me a 1 minute break. I will be back. I just need to grab some water and then I will be back. I'll see you guys in 1 minute. All right, everyone. I am back. So let us continue. Um, yep. So we have the Azure port security inbound. Yep, you can see that the port 5050 is now enabled. So we should be able to connect to our VM. So let us go to the VM. And now let us export the Atlas URI. So let me quickly check the, yep, this was the URI. All right. And then, sorry for that one, not this one. Okay, here. And then I'm going to set the path to MongoDB. And then it's going to be localhost port 27017. Or I think it was backward slash. Let me check. Sorry. Let me clear this up. Export Atlas URI equals to MongoDB. And then it's going to be set up localhost since the application is running on the same machine, and that's going to be 27017. Yep, so that is now done. So I can echo that just to make sure that the env is set up. Yep, you can see that the env is set up, and now I'm going to use the let us to ls. You can see that the main application route is on server.js, and normally I could have just used npm start to run this application, but since we are using VM and in production we use our dedicated process manager, so in this case I'm going to install the pm2 process manager to handle that for us. So I'm going to do npm install pm2 and then c to install it globally for all the application on this VM. And normally in the configure env, you can see that in the demo, I have the URI from the Atlas. So that's the difference when we use a VM. I'm not using any of the managed service, so I'm not going to get this entire entire link or from the MongoDB Atlas. I'm using the local server link that we have installed in our own VM. So you can see that the Atlas URI is not a Atlas link, but instead a local MongoDB URL. All right, and then let us go ahead and try to serve the application. So then I'm going to use PM2 list. You can see we don't have any application right now. It's empty. So ls again, so PM2 start, and then server.js. Yeah, you can see that the server has now started, right? Um, so it's running, but let us check the logs if everything is fine. All right, we don't see any errors here, so should be fine. Dash dash. Let us also check the last 100 lines. Yep, everything should be fine here. So let us go back to the Azure virtual machines and now try to access the VM on port 5050. We don't see anything, so that means something is wrong. Let us see. Let us try to inspect it and see if we get any errors from here. Port 5050. Yeah, we get some errors. Let us try to do it again. All right, we do get some errors, but it's not providing us with full information. So let us try to see if everything is fine on our end. Yep, so the inbound port is accessible. And let us also try to check the server logs if we have anything on the server side. I don't see any server side logs. So let us try to see if everything is fine again. Echo. Let us try to check if the port is right. Yep. Echo $atlas URI. That should also be fine. Um, let us see what could be wrong. Let us try to change. Let us try to use um, the already created Atlas URI and see if that works, just to make sure that the Atlas URI link is fine. This things happens when you are doing deployment. So let's try to do the debugging live. Okay, so export and then Atlas URI equal to, let us try to see if this fix it. I have double Atlas URI, so I'm going to remove this one. All right, so that should be it, right? But I do have, okay, I think I got the mistake over here. I need to put this within the double quote because the CLI expects the white space, and with n percentage, it's gonna expect a new line. So we're going to have to use double quote for that. Yep, that should be fine. And let's check this again with Atlas URI. Sorry, I'm going to have to check the value instead with $sign. Yep, that should be fine. So let me try to delete the application that we had previously in PM2. So that was the name. And I will try to start the server.js again, ls. And I have to provide the entry point path. So PM2 start, and then the path of our entry point. So that's going to be server.js. So it had started again. So let me check the logs, PM2 logs server dash lines and 100 lines. Yep, you can see that the server is listening, and it has also successfully connected to our MongoDB. So if you use the Atlas, then it's being successfully connected. And if I go back here, it's still not running. Something is wrong with our VM, because we already checked that the application is running. It does sometimes takes a few seconds or a few minutes to uh, create or apply the rule, but in our case, it should also already be there. Let us wait for a few seconds, because we already have the access, and it says the server is running on port 5050, and since we have the server enabled, we should be able to get the application. So yeah, let's just give it a few minutes. I am pretty sure it's configuring that on the back end. So I can quickly show you another VM where I have already configured this, and this is the VM which I already have installed the application. So if I open the 5050 port on this one, yeah, you can see that we should have gotten this message instead. Yeah, so let us come back to this specific IP that we deployed live in just a moment, or maybe it could be because of HTTP. Yep, that was the reason, because we don't have the SSL certificate right now on our VM, and that was the reason we were not able to access it on HTTPS endpoint. That's a good catch, and that happens a lot of the time when deploying. So we forget to not use the S within the HTTP prefix because we don't have the TLS certificate right now. We need to do that separately in order for us to be able to access on the HTTPS endpoint. So right, yeah, if you go to HTTPS, you can't access it. But if you go to HTTP, then we should be able to access it. Yeah, so let me close the previous IP. Yeah, so this one is the new one. The new one is, if I go to, the new one is the MERN VM, and we already checked the public IP, and our backend is running, right? So that is super fine. But we also need to make sure that the backend works when we set up the uh, port, the Atlas URI to the one that we use locally. So I think there is something wrong with the MongoDB path that I used. So this is how I use it right now. But let us also try to see if it's set up in a different way, or if we need to do that in a different way. So for that, let me quickly SSH into the VM. Um, let me open the new one, and then let us try to see how it is set up in the current VM, and then that will provide us more information on how we can do that. Desktop, live debugging, folks, CDZSW. Yep. And then this is the key that I used for my previous VM, right? So let us go ahead and try to check that from our Azure portal. So this is my old VM. So I'm going to just copy the public IP, right? And SSS-I GSW Cloud B1. Yep, PAM. And this was my IP for the old VM. So let me SSS into that. I'm into that one, right? And now let us try to see how it is set up over here. Clear, and then let me do PM to list. And you can see that the server is running on same thing. So port describe the server. Yep. And let us try, everything seems to be normal. PM2 env. Let us try to see the environment variables for the server 3. And you can see that the environment variable for our MongoDB URI, let's try to see. It's exactly the same that we have, MongoDB localhost 27017. So we should also be able to get that running without the same one. Let us try it one more time. Echo Atlas URI equal to, I think it was because of the double quotes that we had. And now if I do, no, sorry, I should have used export and not echo Atlas. Or let me check one more thing. If it's Atlas URI or Atlas URI, yeah, it's the Atlas URI. So Atlas URI equal to, yep, that's gonna be the one. And then I'm going to do echo to just to make sure the URI is set up properly. Echo $sign to check the value. Yep, that is set up perfectly. And now let's going to delete the previous PM2, which was using the MongoDB Atlas. PM to delete server. Yep, and now I'm going to start the server.js again. Yep, that's running. And I'm going to do PM2 log server.js. And we don't see any logs, dash lines. Nope. There is something wrong with our MongoDB in this instance. I'm not sure what's the reason, so I'm going to come back to this later on. But for now, let us go ahead and use the use the Atlas URI. But yeah, I'm going to come back to this later on. And also, if not in the stream, then I'm going to point it in the resource of what went wrong and try to debug this at the end point of time. But to save us with the time and the uh, smoothness of the stream, let us just use the Atlas URI instead from the actual Atlas instance. Okay, so that's going to be the command, and I'm going to delete the PM2 application again. All right, PM2 delete server. Yep, and then I'm going to start the server again, server.js. All right, and now pm2 log server.js, server.js. That should be fine. Let us try to see if the application is running. Yep, now the application is running, as you can see. All right, so our backend is now deployed. So let us go ahead and continue with our front end. So once again, I need to go back to the VM, right? And let me go to the front end routes. That's going to be client. And here we also have the React application. So I'm going to have to install all the packages. I'm going to do npm install. All right, I am getting some comments of I will definitely try to make this in a bit slower place. Thanks for the comments and the review. So let us try to now deploy the front end, but just to quickly recap all the things that we did today. Um, so we have created a virtual machine in Azure, and then we connected it using SSH. Uh, then we installed our backend server application with Node.js. But before that, we also did install our MongoDB server instance. So MongoDB was running, and then we had our backend running, and we served it using the PM2 process manager. And now we are going to serve our front end. The backend is running on port 8080, remember? So we get this message, server is running, and I have created some dummy records. If I go to /records path, you can see I think it's record and not records. Yep, you can see that we do get some records. So this is some dummy record that I created in the database, and that's how we get it. Um, Now we are going to deploy the front end. So let us go and see our backend again. All right, so now we are in the client folder. So this is for the front end, right? And I have already installed all the packages. So if you go and check the README for the front end, for example, this one, uh, and then you can see for front end, we need to also provide it with the Vite API URL, which is actually the endpoint to our backend, right? So if you run this locally, then it's going to be localhost 5050, but we need to replace the localhost with the Azure IP here because our application is now on the Azure virtual machine. So that is what we are going to do. So first we need to export this as a variable again. So I'm just going to copy this one. And within the client folder, I'm going to do export this one, but instead of local host, I'm going to replace this with the public IP of our Azure virtual machine. So the public IP is going to be this one. Let me go to virtual machines and the public IP. Yeah, I'm going to copy the public IP again, and I'm going to replace the part with the public IP. And the backend is running on port 5050, so that should be fine. So I'm going to export this one. I'm going to confirm this again with Vite API URL. And this time, let's check the value. Yeah, the value is now set. And since this is using Vite, so we need to build the application. For instance, if I go to the repo and if I see the package.json for the front end, you can see that it's using the Vite build command, and this will create a dist folder within our client. So I have already done that locally. So you will get something like this with all the HTML and CSS and all the SS file. And that is what we are going to actually serve using PM2 for our front end. So we're going to use the white build command, but since it's within the package of JSON, can also use npm build to run the command. And that will use white to build our React application. So I'm going to use npm run and build. So this is creating the white build for our production use case. And now if I do ls again, you can see that we have a dist folder, right? So that is actually where we have the static files for our React front end. So if I go to dist ls, then these are all the assets that we need for our front end. So we have the dist folder. So now I'm going to use PM2 again to serve the front end static files. So PM2 and then start, not start, we are going to serve the static files. So for backend, we need to use the PM2 start command, while for front end stuff, we are going to serve it using the dash dash SPA, which stands for single page application, to serve this. And then we need to provide it the path to the static file. So that's going to be the dist folder, right? And then we also need to provide it with the port where we want to expose our application. So let's expose our application on port 80. So that should now be running. So you can see that we have a second application in PM2, and that's running on port 80. So let us go ahead and try to access the application on port 80 again. So that was for the front end, right? So let us copy the same IP. And now let us just do port 80, which if you just use HTTP, it's by default port 80. So even if you don't type in port 80, then it's going to be pointing to the same URL. But just to make sure, then let's go to point 80. And you can see that it's loading, but we don't get any result. That is because we still have not enabled port 80 on our virtual machine. So we need to go back to our network settings in the Azure virtual machines. And here we need to create a new port rule and select the inbound port rule. And here, the request could come from anywhere, from any IP, so we don't restrict that one. But the destination port should be fixed. So for this case, we will provide it at port 80, right? So that is allowed. And let us just add this rule. So now we should be able to also access port 80 on our inbound rules. So that if I go to here and port 80 again, then I should be able to see this one. I will also make sure it's HTTP and then port 80, or you can leave it as it is. All right, it's applying the network settings, in my opinion, so that's why we are not able to see that right now, but let's just wait for a few more moments. In the meantime, I'm more than happy to take on the comments that we have. All right. Yep. Thanks for the comment. I am trying to go as slow as I can. And also, you can always follow the guide that I have. For example, I can show you that quickly. So all the instructions and the command that I have shown you are also available in this guide. So please go ahead and use the guide to go it at your own pace. And all the instructions are also here. So make sure you access the application in that way. All right, let us go back and check the application again. So still we don't have the site up. Let us try to see what's happening out here. All right, the site is not able to connect. This is always most probably because of the network settings it's taking some time to apply. Okay, somehow it's setting port to 8080 and not 80. So this is not what we want. We want it, oh, sorry, that was for the old VMs. So that's expected, not our fault. So this is the current one, and that is port 80. So that should be correct. I'm going to check the VM public IP gain, and let us just quickly confirm if backend is running. Yep, backend is running fine. And if I go to front end, it's not running. So let us go ahead and check the server logs and see why is this the case. So PM2 logs, and then I'm going to name put in the name of the application. Yep, so we are getting some errors. That's going to be permission is denied on port 80. All right, because port 80 is already used by the VMs. All right, so we need to run our application in a different port and not port 80 because some other process is already using the port 80. So I'm going to delete the current one then. You can always use different logging tools to get to the end of the cause of your problem. So now I need to serve it using a different one. So serve again dash SPA, the folder which contains our static asset is test. And this time let's do it on, let's say, port 5000, or let's do it on port 4000 for our front end, right? So now if I do logs again, let me just quickly confirm that. PM to logs, and then let me copy this one. Yeah, now it's exposing the port. So we should be able to access this one, but remember that we also need to enable the port on the virtual machine. So let's go to network settings, create port rule inbound. Source could be anything, again, from any range. We don't restrict that one because we want our website to be accessible by everyone in the internet. So we need to, we cannot restrict the source. Um, and for example, if this was application that you only use, let's say, within your campus or within your organization, then you can select the IP address range or specific IPs in that case. And then we need to enable port 4000 instead. So I'm going to click on add, right? So that's going to create the security rule. And let me delete the port 81 because we can't use that anymore. All right. Mhm. Yep. Okay. Let me check that again. So we have the port 4000, right? And then let me delete the port 80 because we don't need that anymore. So we only have port 4000 open for our front end PM2 serving our front end asset, and port 5050 for PM2 serving our backend. Yep, that's gonna be okay. So now let us go ahead and see port 4000. Yep, and here you can see that we have our front end. So you can see the employee record. So this was the one data which I already added, but you can go ahead and create a new one. So for example, we can go with Tommy, and then the position is the front end dev, right? And let's go with the intern. And if we click on save, and you can see that the new records are being added. So any one of you in the internet right now, you can go ahead and try to uh, copy and go to this link and check if you can able if you're able to access the front end of our applications. Kuso, I saw your comment of unable to connect. Could you please describe like on which specific part you are not able to connect? Is it on MongoDB or is it on something else? um, just want to see the entire picture or try to help you debug that. So you should be able to, I changed it to port 4000. So in that case, I would suggest you to do two different things. The first would be to go ahead and check if the logs says it's exposing on port 4000 properly, because you need to make sure that the process is running properly. In my previous case, I checked the logs and it said that the permission is denied on port 80 because some other process is already listening on that port. So I cannot use that port on this VM. So that's why I used a different port. So after I used a different port, then it was able to access it. And before that, also please remember to export the white API URL before you build your application, because this will bind your white API URL during the build process. So you also need to do this process carefully and make sure that you use the public IP and then the port of your backend, which is 5050 in our case. So this is going to be the public IP of your Azure virtual machine that you need to export. And once you export that, then you need to make sure that your application is running. So after you do both of this process, you should technically be able to see your applications on Microsoft Azure. So that was it. I mean, for the our application to get up and running on virtual machine. But now we are going to explore more into the different options that we have in the virtual machines, and we're also going to debug why the backend was not working when we used the the MongoDB URI locally. So let us try to debug that first, because remember, right now for our server, we are using the Atlas URI and not the local one. So let's also try to debug that. Let me do that again. So I'm going to delete the current server again, and then let me go to server folder. By the way, I could expose that variable from anywhere, but yeah, let's try to follow the instructions. So for our backend, we need the Atlas URI, right? So Atlas URI, export Atlas URI equals to, let us put it double quote, MongoDB dot dot slash slash, and then uh, we are going to use the MongoDB port. So that's going to be the port 27017. So if I'm not wrong, then that's going to be localhost port 27017. Yep. And then that should be it, right? So I'm going to do pm2 start, and then I need to provide the main entry point application. Yep, the server is there. And now let me check the logs, pm2 logs server. And then let us do lines and 1000. Yep, and you can see that it's now able to connect to our MongoDB even when we used the local one. And so remember that we are not using the MongoDB Atlas URI, and it's using the localhost. I believe the most probable reason was the codes that I forgot to do it in the first time, or either I messed up with the port number or something like that. But yeah, you can see that the application is now connected to the MongoDB, and this is not using the MongoDB Atlas URI. And I can confirm that by using pm2 env, and the process ID is 3. So if I check the environment variable for the MongoDB, here you can see that the Atlas URI is localhost 27017. So now if I go back to my application, and if I open the front end port, you can see that all the data are gone, because this is a fresh database and it's not from the Atlas URI. So this is a reading data from the new database, right? So if I go back here and open the port 5050, you can see that we don't have any. And if I go to the record route, which is slash record, we don't have any records, because now we are using the locally installed MongoDB within our virtual machine. So hence it does not have any data. So left, if I click on a new one, then I can see a new record. So here you can see that we have a new record now, right? So I can create a new one. Let's go to record 2, and then Cloud Native Developer Senior, and then we have a new record as well. So this is a new record, and then this is the default record that is created when the database is launched, and these two are the one that we added right now. So that is how you can use the local MongoDB community in addition to host your database on Azure virtual machines. All right, let me go back to the stream, and then we will talk more about some of the additional network configurations and some security configurations. And also, I will also be talking a bit about the custom DNS that you can use for our application. All right, let me go back to the stream. Uh, I think that is because, so we have one more question. Your front end works now, but you can't see your data that you installed. That is probably because you don't have proper connection to your backend. So first, I will give you two information that might help you to debug. So for example, go to your front-end URI. In this case, my was 4000. And when you open the inspect port, and then you go to console, and when you refresh this page, you should be able to see some information on this section, which might help you to debug the debug. If it says something you can't connect to the backend, then make sure that you're using the right public IP, and then the backend port for your White API. So for example, this is your backend port in my case, it's a different public IP. In your case, it will be a different one, but the port will be same, 50/50, right? So just make sure you have exported this properly as your Vite API URL when you build the application. So for example, when you are trying to run the server, so you need to, sorry, your client, let's go to cd client, and then you need to export the Vite API URL, Vite API URL or URI. Let me quickly check that. It was URL instead. Yep, URL. Let me come back here. URL equals to, also put double quote just to make sure you don't get the same issue that I faced earlier. And also make sure that you avoid the slash at the end because we already have slash configured in the route. So it will prefix that all by default. So you need to remove the slash at the end. So it has to be something like this: http dot dot slash slash your public IP and then the port of the backend. And once you do this, and then you can run npm run build, right? Npm run build, and this is going to build your dist application folder. And then you can use pm to serve dash dash spa, and then the dist folder and dash dash port, and you can give it any port that you want for your front end. But once you put the port in the front end, you also need to enable that in the Azure. And also, I request you to use the PM to logs feature to first use PM to list the application, and then use PM to logs, and just copy the name of the application, or even the ID would work. For example, 2 in this case would be the ID, and then just use the last 1000 line or last 500 line to check if everything, sorry, that should be lines and not line, and see if it's saying exposing something properly or not. So if this is running fine, and also check the logs for the backend. So 500, right? And PM to logs 1. And then you should also not be seeing any error here. So this will help you point out the mistakes. I hope this helps. All right. Let us see anything else. We don't have anything else here. So then we can go back and check some additional network configuration. All right. So I am going back to the virtual machines. And here you can see that we have the activity log where you can get a status of different operations. For in this case, we don't have much issues. Otherwise, you would get different operations updates over here, right? So you can get if your VM is down, or if someone tries to change some policy in your VM, something like that. So that is also updated here. So everything is fine for us right now. And here you can give access control to someone else. If they had a, let's say, an Azure account, or if you are working in a group, then you can go ahead and add someone else. So for example, click add role assignments, and I can give them different access. For example, I can give them an administrator access, virtual machine administrator login, or you can see there are like different labels. For example, you can provide them a reader access by which they can view the virtual machines and they can read different instructions or read the different configuration, but they cannot make any change. But if you provide them with different roles like monitoring, by they can only read the monitoring data. So they have different um, access, and you can give them access based on different roles that you have. But if you want to give them a full admin access, then you can go to a privileged administrator role and give them either a owner, by which they can even delete the VM, or give them just the contributor access if you want that. And then let's say if I want to give someone a contributor access, and I will click on that and next, and here I can um, if they are already a part of your Azure AD tenant, then you can just select the members, or you can also search members by the email address that you want. So you can see that I'm getting emails from our tenant. So you can just go ahead and do that as well. And then if you do that, then you can get access to share the access to other users or other applications. So that's about the IAM feature. And then we also have the network settings, which I mentioned before. So here we talked about the inbound rule. And right now we have enabled the outbound port to everything. So right now our virtual machine is configured to access anything on the internet, or it can connect with anything. So, but if you want to restrict your virtual machine to only access certain group of IPs, then you can also restrict your outbound ports as well. But normally for inbound port, we if you are doing it for dev, then we normally enable the SSS port. But once it's in production, we do and manage everything by CI/CDs and other tools. So we don't even enable the SSS port, and we definitely do not expose the backend port. So let me go ahead and do that. I enable the SSS backend port just for us to see the different routes and records and easy debugging. Um, but we don't normally expose our backend port. We only, even if we expose that, we don't expose that to the entire internet. We only expose that to certain group of IPs, for example, the developer IDs. So let me, since this is now exposed to the internet, I'll go ahead and delete this rule, right? That is what we are going to do. But if you, let's say, just want to access the backend API port for development purpose, then what we can do is, instead of source any, I can just select my IP address or IP address, my IP address. So that is, it's gonna just give access to my IP address. So now if even, let's say I go to my public IP and do port 5050, this will work for me, but for anyone else in the internet, this will not work. Sorry for that. And then that was about the network security rules. I hope my screen is still visible. Yep, I guess it's properly visible. And then that was about the network settings. We also have the different options such as load balancing, and here is where you can, let's say your application is huge and you have distributed your application across multiple VMs, then you can add a load balancer to balance your load across different virtual machines. So that is about load balancing. And now talking about the different configuration for your DEX. So right now it's using a premium SSD for us, which has the 30 gigabits of memory with 120 IOPS, but you can also always add additional DICs if you want. So if you want a new DICs, if 30 GB is not enough for you, then you can just create a new DICs, and you can specify the size that you want, and then Azure will create the DICs for you. And operating system, we are using Ubuntu 24, so that's the Azure. And the operating system information for configuration, um, you can have different information, like if you want your VMs to be configured within a closed group of server racks, then you can use the different options here. But right now we don't want that, so we don't want proximity placement or those things. For example, this is really useful when you have a lot of VMs and you want them to be close to each other so that to reduce latency. Then in that case, for example, a Redis cluster, then in that case these things can be useful, but not now. And you can see all the properties here. And this is about scaling. So if you want to ever change your virtual machine size to a different one, then you can always go ahead and increase your VM size. And also, or you can also add more VMs using the scaling option. So you can do vertical scaling, which is just increasing the size or decreasing the size of your current VM, or you can add more VMs so that their load can be distributed across multiple VMs. Or if you are using multiple VMs, then you can reduce it to a certain number one. So that's the horizontal scaling. And for security, we have the identity access. So this is what allows your VM to connect to different Azure resources. So if you want to, let's say, access certain storage service or certain other Azure services, then you can use the identity policy for now, but you don't need to go into that much right now. You can set up your backup and disaster recovery point and the information over here. And the other thing that you might want to check is the auto shutdown feature. So let's say you have a scheduled time when you don't want your VM to be up and you want to save some cost. then you can enable this and you can define the time that you want your VM to shut down. So that will automatically shut it down for you, and you can turn it up again. So that's the different auto shutdown options. You can have the different monitoring options. Right now it's disabled because these things cost you some money. So if you want to Azure to monitor a lot of things for you, such as your CPU and health status, your disk state and everything, then you can enable this one. But to save some cost, then I have disabled this one. You can also get some alerts, custom alerts. So let's say your CPU utilization exceeds 80%, that means your VM is overloaded. Then you can set up some automated alerts that you can use. You can get some metrics about different performance. So like the available number of memory bytes, the disk IOPS and everything. Then you can get that from the metrics tab. And you can also get the application logs over here, and also the infrastructure logs, but you need to have this enabled separately. So these are the different options, and you can also get some troubleshooting guide for your connection, for your performance diagnosis, and all those things. So that was about the virtual machines that I wanted to tell you. Let me go back and check the comments. Yeah, that also a very good questions. Can I create the VM that I created? Yep, that's really good questions there. So you should at least, if you don't want to delete it, you should at least stop it. So from here you can see the stop tab. For let me actually go ahead and do that, or let me actually delete the old VM that I created, or stop it at least. So this will reduce some of your cost. At least your VM is not running, so that cost will be reduced for you. But since even your VM is stopped, you are still occupying the disk storage where your data is actually stored. Your all your operating system data and everything that you do within that 30 GB of storage, that is still there even when the VM is stopped. So they will charge you for the storage, but at least the VM is not working, so they will not charge you for the CPU and memory that your VM is using. So you should always stop it. And then if you don't want your VM at all, or once you're done with your project, then you can go ahead and actually delete that so that you don't have any cost at all. But in our case, you can actually go ahead and delete this one, because tomorrow we are not going to create a virtual machine. We are going to use the Azure web app. I can quickly give you a glimpse. So we have the different uh, app services that we're going to use to run our application, and that behind the scene will create the VM for itself, but we don't ever actually see the VM it creates. So we don't get control over the VM and the actual server it's managing. So you can safely go ahead and delete the VM for now if you are done with the demo. But if you want to just experiment with it, then you can always do that. For example, if you want to get some more information about about the operating system details that it run, then there is a command cat slash etc/os release, right? So if you get here, you get more information about the operating system. So here you can see it's using Ubuntu 24.04, and you can see the different details of the operating systems. And if you want to just experiment with it, then you can totally go ahead and do that. But for the demo, it's done. So if you're done with the demo, please feel free to delete it, because otherwise it will incur your credits and it might exceed your $100 credit limit. So please go ahead and stop that once you're done. Um, so that was about the virtual machines and how we can create our applications. Um, and also one more thing that I quickly wanted to show you. So I talked about resource group, and right now if I go to one application, you can see that all the related resources for for this project was within the same resource group. So we created the virtual machine, but behind the scene, the virtual machine created the public IP, which is a separate resource, which can also be created independently, even if we did not create the VM. So it was created and it is kept under the same resource group. There is also a network security group that was created for us behind the scene. It is kept in the same resource group. The virtual network, the network interface, the SSH key that we created, and the disk. So all of these are separate resources that we could have created independently, but since we created virtual machine, and virtual machine requires all of these resources, so it created all of them for us, and then it actually um, put them under the same resource group. So it's very easy for us to delete. So now when I actually delete the resources, so for example, if these were independent resources, then I would have had to find the resource group and then click on delete resource group. And then I would have to copy the name and then enter the resource group name. And you also need to delete the virtual machines and virtual machine scale sets. And this option is very critical. For example, if your application is running, then you should never apply force delete. But if you are very sure that all of these are the applications that you actually want to delete, then you can apply force delete. Then it will, even if it had application running or if the virtual machine is not in a stopped state, it will first bring it down to a stopped state and then it deletes it automatically. So that is about the resource group. But in our case, since all of these other resources was created by the VM, so if we even don't go to resource group and if we just delete the VM, it will and it should delete all the thing within the resource group. So if I go to this one and if I just click on, so first I need to, like I said, if I click on delete, then it will tell me to uh, delete the VM. So if I click here and then if I delete, then I need to delete it one by one, like all the different resources like DEX and everything. But if I click on apply force delete and if I select everything, delete with VM, then it will delete all the network interface and public IP. So I can delete all the resources from here as well. So yeah, so since it has a dependency of what resources needs to be deleted first in for the virtual machine to be deleted, so it will delete in a certain order. So let us um, wait for it to delete, and then we are done with the demo. In the meantime, let me check if we have some more information or if we have some more questions. I don't see anything, so that's good. Also, please make sure once again that you had checked into this event, and tomorrow we will be talking about the follow up for the part one. So tomorrow we'll use the managed service to deploy our MERN application in a managed way. So let me go ahead and check that again. If the VM is now deleted, yep, you can see that the VM is now deleted. If I don't think it's the VM, it's the resources for the VM. So if I click on delete, and now it does not find because it has been deleted. So let me go back. Yep. And now let us also go ahead and check the resource group again one more time to make sure we don't have anything, but we do. So uh, these were the resources that were not deleted. So also please make sure that sometimes, ideally, it should have been deleted because I did not select all the things that was in the drop down before when I deleted the VM. That why I did not deleted this resource. So in that case, it's a very handy feature to come down to resource group and delete the entire resource group. I'll click on copy and delete, and now this should delete everything that we have in the resource group. And that will save you all the money and the cost. Let us wait for a few more seconds. Deleting public IP and these things generally take some time, especially the network interface. So let us wait for, yeah, once this is done, then we should have a clean, yeah, you can see that it says displays all the operation that we did. So this is also really useful to get the activities that we did in the VM. So yeah, you can see that it logs everything that we do. If someone accidentally deleted something, then we can come here to check what happened. Um, yep, you can see we have almost all the other resources now deleted. So we just have two remaining, and that should also be done in no time. Yep, now we don't have anything. And finally, once the resources group is empty, then I can come down and the resource group should also not be there. All right. So the resource group is now empty. Yep, it's not found. It just needs to refresh. It's displayed here, maybe some cache issues, but yeah, the resource group, yep, is also now gone. So that is about the demo. Let me switch back to the slide. Yeah, so thank you everyone for being here. And I hope you all learned something about how you can use VMs to deploy your MERN application. And tomorrow we are going to use the managed services and learn how we can use Azure managed services, especially the web apps and the static web apps, as well as GitHub Actions to automate the CI/CD deployment. So remember all the struggles that we had today of setting up the VM ourselves, of installing Node, of installing MongoDB, of configuring different ports ourselves. So all of that hassles also, like having to check the logs ourselves by SSH into the VMs and everything that we did today. So all of those struggles were there, but also this is really helpful if you want the full customization power to yourself, but that is mostly not needed. If you quickly want to spin up your application, that's a lot of overhead that you have to maintain. And also if you are doing some version upgrades, or then you have to take care of all your packages and dependencies and versions and operating system updates by yourself. So those are the drawbacks of the VMs, but it, on the other side, it provides you with a lot of customization and benefits that you do not get with the managed service. So tomorrow we'll see the managed services approach and see how it can help some of the problems that we face today. So I'll see you there. Until then, have a great time and bye bye.